My mom slapped me in front of the whole family for disrespecting my stepdad. She didn't know what I had in my phone. My mother slapped me across the face in front of 11 family members because I told the truth about my stepfather. That was 4 months ago. Last week, she called me crying at 2 a.m. asking me to please forgive her. I let it ring twice before I picked up. I'm going to tell you everything. From the moment I found the first weird charge on a bank statement I wasn't even supposed to see, to the night my whole family watched my mother's hand connect with my face, to what happened when I finally proved I was right. I need to get this off my chest, so bear with me. This is long, but I promise it's worth it. I'm 24. I moved out of my mom's house 2 years ago, but I still live 15 minutes away in a small apartment above a laundromat. Because rent in this economy is a joke, and staying close to my little brother Max, who's 15, was non-negotiable after everything our family's been through. Quick backstory, my dad died when I was 12. Car accident. He left behind a life insurance payout and a trust fund, split 3 ways between my mom, me, and eventually Max. Mine was earmarked for college and later, whatever big life step you need it for, in my dad's words, according to the letter he'd written before he died, that my mom read to me the day I turned 18. My mom remarried when I was 16. His name is Gary. Gary sells commercial HVAC systems, drives a leased truck he can't really afford, and has spent 8 years being what I'd call fine. Not warm, not cruel, just fine. He never legally adopted us, never really tried to be a dad, more like a permanent houseguest with opinions about how loud the TV was. I tolerated him because my mom seemed happy, and Max needed a stable house more than I needed to love the guy sleeping in it. That's the setup. Now here's where it goes wrong. About 7 months ago, I needed a copy of an old bank statement for a grad school financial aid form, proof of a custodial account that had my name on it from when I was a kid. I called the bank, and because I'm still listed as a joint account holder on some old paperwork from before my dad died, the rep accidentally pulled up more than she should have and mentioned casually that the balance looked low compared to 12 months ago. I hadn't touched that account in years. I didn't even know the balance offhand, so I asked her to email me a full year of statements, thinking maybe there'd been a bank fee issue. There wasn't a bank fee issue. There were 4 withdrawals over 8 months, totaling almost $19,000. Wire transfers, not to me, not to Max's account, to an external account I didn't recognize. My hands were actually shaking when I called my mom. She's the account's other authorized signer since I was a minor when it was set up. I asked her as calm as I could manage if she knew anything about the withdrawals. She got weird, evasive. Said Gary had borrowed some money for a business thing and that he was paying it back. I asked what business thing. She didn't have a real answer. I asked why my trust fund, money my dead father left specifically for me, was being used as Gary's personal line of credit without anyone asking me. She told me to relax and that it's family money, it all comes back around eventually. I did not relax. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing things I'd brushed off for years. Gary working late, way more than an HVAC sales job should require. Gary being cagey with his phone, angling the screen away at dinner. Gary taking a guy's fishing trip to Charleston, a 9-hour drive from a landlocked county in Ohio, for a guy who owns 0 fishing gear. I'm not proud of this part, but I started digging. My best friend Jenna, who works in fraud prevention at a credit union, walked me through how to trace a wire transfer's receiving bank without doing anything illegal, basically just knowing what to ask for and being persistent with customer service reps who owed me answers as an account holder. The receiving account belonged to a woman named Priya Malhotra in Charleston, South Carolina. I found her on Instagram in about 4 minutes, public profile, trip photos. A hotel bathroom mirror selfie from a business hotel in our own city. From a weekend, Gary claimed he was at a sales conference. And in the comments of a post from 6 weeks earlier, a comment from a private, half-anonymous account congratulating her on finally getting your own place. You deserve it, babe, with a heart eyes emoji. Gary had wired my college and grad school money to fund an apartment for a woman he was seeing on the side. I want to be clear about something. I wasn't looking for a reason to hate him. I genuinely tried to give this the most boring, innocent explanation possible for weeks. A loan for a real business. A coincidence with the name. Anything. I even asked Gary directly. Alone, no ambush, just the two of us in the garage while he was working on his truck. I asked him plainly if he was using money from my account, and if there was someone named Priya involved. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "You need to stop snooping in grown folks' business, and I don't appreciate the accusation." That was the moment I stopped giving him the benefit of the doubt. Thanksgiving was at my Grandma Pearl's house, like every year. 11 people around the table. My mom, Gary, Max, Grandma Pearl, my Aunt Diane and her husband, my two cousins, and a couple of family friends who have come every year since I was a kid. I did not plan to blow things up at dinner. I want to be honest about that because a lot of people are going to say I chose the worst possible moment, and maybe I did, but it wasn't premeditated. It's just that Gary opened his big mouth first. Somewhere between the turkey and the pie, Gary made a comment, half joking. In that smug way, he gets after 2 beers about how some people in this family need to learn their place and stop acting like they run things. He was looking directly at me when he said it. Everyone laughed a little, the nervous kind of laugh families do to smooth over tension. I don't know exactly what flipped in me. Maybe it was the 7 months of biting my tongue. Maybe it was watching him reach for a second helping of stuffing paid for, indirectly, with my dead father's insurance money. I said calmly, "Actually, Gary, maybe you should learn your place before you spend another dime of my college fund on Priya's new apartment in Charleston." The table went dead silent. My Aunt Diane's fork actually stopped halfway to her mouth. Gary's face went white and then red in about 2 seconds. He started sputtering something about how I was twisting things and trying to destroy this family over a misunderstanding. I didn't back down. I said I had bank statements. I said I had a name, a city, and screenshots. I said I wasn't trying to destroy anything. I was trying to get an honest answer about where $19,000 of my dead father's money went, because nobody would give me one. That's when my mother stood up. She didn't yell first. She just stood up, walked around the table, grabbed my arm, and told me to apologize to Gary right now in this low, shaking voice I'd never heard her use. I said no. I said I wasn't the one who owed an apology, and that's when she slapped me. Open hand, full swing across my left cheek, hard enough that my ear rang and Max actually gasped out loud. Grandma Pearl said, "Linda." That's my mom's name in this horrified voice. My cousin started recording on her phone before anyone told her to stop, which honestly ended up mattering a lot later. For a second, nobody moved. My mom looked almost as shocked as I was, like her hand had done it before her brain caught up. Gary, to his credit for about the only time that night, looked uncomfortable, not defending me but not gloating either. I didn't cry. I remember that clearly because everyone probably expected me to. I just held my cheek, looked at my mother, and said, "You just hit me to protect a man who's stealing from your dead husband's kid." Sit with that, then I got my coat and I left. Max followed me out to my car, shaking, and told me he believed me, and that he'd seen Gary's phone light up with a text from someone saved as P a few weeks earlier and hadn't known what to make of it until now. That confirmation from a 15-year-old who had zero reason to lie for me hit harder than almost anything else that night. I spent the next 3 days barely eating, cycling between rage and this hollow, humiliated feeling I couldn't shake. My mom called 11 times. I didn't answer once. What broke the case wide open wasn't me. It was Aunt Diane. Diane, it turns out, had been quietly suspicious of Gary for a while. She'd seen him at a restaurant downtown with a woman who wasn't my mom back in the spring, and had talked herself out of saying anything because she didn't want to start drama after Thanksgiving. Guilt got the better of her, and she called me and told me everything, including that the woman she'd seen matched the photos I'd mentioned at dinner. She also told me something I wasn't prepared for. She said hesitantly that she thought my mom already knew. That back in the spring, my mom had asked Diane out of nowhere whether she thought some marriages could survive one mistake if the person was really sorry. Diane hadn't thought much of it at the time. In hindsight, it read very differently. I called my mom back for the first time since Thanksgiving. Not to make up to ask her one question point blank. Did you know about Priya before I found out? There was this long, awful silence, and then she said yes. She'd found a hotel receipt in Gary's jacket back in March, confronted him privately. He'd cried, promised it was a one-time thing, a midlife crisis, begged her not to blow up the family. She'd believed him, or wanted to. She'd even known, vaguely, that money was moving around, but Gary had told her it was temporary for a work debt, and she hadn't pushed. Because, and this is the part that really got me, she was scared that if the marriage fell apart, she'd be starting over financially at 51, and some small, ugly part of her had decided my trust fund was an acceptable risk to protect her own stability. She hadn't known the exact amount. She hadn't known where the money specifically went until I said Priya's name out loud at that table. But she'd known enough for 8 months, and she'd chosen silence, and then she'd chosen to slap her own kid for breaking that silence in public. I told her I needed space, and I hung up. Here's where the justice part comes in, because I know that's what everyone's waiting for. The trust account was a legally protected custodial account, originally set up through my late father's estate. Withdrawals without proper authorization from a beneficiary who was already an adult, me, weren't just a family betrayal. They were potentially actionable. I met with a lawyer a family friend recommended, mostly just to understand my options, not necessarily to nuke everything. Turns out the lawyer was very interested. Because the account had been converted to my sole authority the day I turned 23, over a year before any of these withdrawals happened. Gary hadn't just spent money he had access to. He'd forged my mother's continued co-signing authority on paperwork to authorize wires from an account that legally wasn't hers to authorize anymore. That's not a family misunderstanding, that's fraud. I sent Gary one message, a photo of the account authorization documents with the date circled and the words, "You had no legal right to touch this account. I'll be in contact with my attorney." Then I blocked him. 2 weeks later, my grandmother, who had been quietly furious since Thanksgiving, called a family meeting at her house without Gary present. My mom came, Aunt Diane came. It was Grandma Pearl, 79 years old, who said the sentence I don't think I'll ever forget. "Linda, you put your hand on my granddaughter to protect a man who was stealing from a dead man's children. I raised you better than that, and you're going to fix this." My mom moved out of the house she shared with Gary less than a month later. She filed for divorce. Gary, facing both a divorce and a very real threat of a fraud complaint tied to the forged authorization, agreed to a settlement that included full repayment of the $19,000 plus interest. Paid out over 18 months, in exchange for me not pursuing criminal charges, a decision I went back and forth on for weeks, and ultimately made because my mom asked me to consider Max, who didn't need to watch a parent figure face criminal proceedings on top of everything else, and because getting the money back guaranteed mattered more to me than making a point. His job found out anyway. Turns out borrowing money via wire fraud from your stepdaughter's trust account travels fast in a small town, and commercial HVAC sales is a surprisingly small, gossipy industry. He lost his job about 10 weeks after Thanksgiving. Last I heard, he and Priya are no longer together either. Apparently the apartment he funded for her came with promises about leaving my mom that he never actually followed through on until the truth forced his hand. And once the money and the marriage were both gone, so was she. Here's the twist a lot of people won't see coming, because most of these stories end with the villain in flames and everyone else riding off into a clean sunset. Mine didn't, because the real emotional gut punch for me was never really about Gary. It was that my mother knew and chose her own comfort over my inheritance and my truth for 8 months, and then slapped me in front of our whole family for saying it out loud. That's the part therapy has actually been helping me untangle, because Gary's a stranger functionally. But my mom is my mom, and the version of the story where I get to be simply, cleanly angry at one bad man was never the real story. She's been in individual counseling since February. She wrote me a letter, an actual handwritten letter, not a text, about 6 weeks ago, that didn't ask me to forgive her on any timeline. Which honestly is the first time she's approached this whole thing in a way that didn't center her own need to feel resolved. I'm not fully back in her life the way I used to be. I see her, we talk. Max is still Max, and I'm not going to let this cost me my relationship with my little brother. But there's a wariness now that wasn't there before, and I don't think it's going anywhere fast, and I've made peace with that. 3 months later, a few people in the comments on my original post asked me to update when there was news, so here it is. Gary made his 6th of 18 repayment installments last week. On time, so far, mostly because my lawyer structured it with real teeth if he defaults. He reached out to Max once awkwardly to ask if he wanted to grab a burger sometime. Max said no. I didn't push him either way. That's his call to make, not mine. My mom and I had Sunday dinner together 3 weeks ago, just the two of us at a diner, neutral ground. She apologized again, this time without any, but you have to understand, attached to it, which is new. I told her I appreciated that, and that I wasn't ready to say things were okay, but I was willing to keep having dinner. She asked me near the end if I remembered the slap every time I looked at her. I told her the truth, not every time anymore. But I remember it clearly enough to know I'll never again mistake her silence for safety. Grandma Pearl still brings it up sometimes, mostly to remind my mom, gently but firmly, that trust isn't rebuilt with an apology. It's rebuilt with time and consistency. And that she'd better be showing up for both. As for the trust fund, what's left of it, plus the repayment, is finally actually mine again. I start my graduate program in the spring, exactly the way my dad wanted it used in the first place. If there's a lesson in any of this, it's not really about Gary, and it's not even really about the money. It's that silence to keep the peace almost always costs someone else more than it costs you. My mom learned that the hard way. I'd rather you learn it from a story than a slap.